Hey, welcome back to Q-Score, where each week I, the Q in Q-Score, bring you the greatest music supervisors and the best composers in the visual media. On the fourth episode of the show, I'm lucky enough to welcome acclaimed music supervisor and industry professional Tracey McKnight. Tracey's been one of the most prolific music supervisors in the industry, supervising, yeah, I'm telling you this number, over 100 films, including such great ones as The Messenger, Delirious, Coffee and Cigarettes, and Raising Victor Vargas. Over the last 5 years, she's worked at and was then head of the music department at Lionsgate Films, where she oversaw the massive Hunger Games series. The franchise's first installment, Hunger Games, was a record-breaking box office phenom, and the Hunger Games District 12 and Beyond soundtrack album debuted at #1 on Billboard's Top 200 and was the top-selling soundtrack of 2012. She's now back in the independent supervision world, where she's currently working on 2 new films, Draft Day, starring Kevin Costner and Jennifer Garner, directed by the legendary Ivan Reitman, and the modern-day Shakespearean adaptation of Cymbeline, set in downtown New York City. And the film stars Ethan Hawke and Mila Jovovich. Large or small, Tracey brings cool factor and vibe to any film she works on. Ladies and gentlemen, Tracey McKnight. Tracey McKnight, how are you, my love?
I'm excellent, how are you?
So just a couple friends sitting around chatting.
Can you believe we've known each other a long time?
Yes, we have, a couple years now. So I want to go back to the roots of how you got started in the business. Talk about what made you get into music supervision, why and how.
You know, I have a very interesting story in the fact that none of it sort of makes sense, and yet it sort of landed me where I am, which is, as my peeps know, my people know, I went to the Fashion Institute. Although I didn't take any fashion courses, I thought I was going to work for Estee Lauder and create shampoo and fragrances. And while I was there, I went down to get a job at the job wall and the little index cards that were up, and I got a job at a recording studio around the corner called Planet Sound. And it was kind of the thing that changed my life. You know, where I was going in one direction, and as soon as I got into that studio, I was the night manager for 3 years while I graduated from college, and there I saw how records were made, met musicians, and just saw the whole creative process. And in the meantime also, you know, Donny Osmond recorded there and Anita Baker, and I was bitten by the bug. And from there, I was an assistant at Arista Records in radio and video promotion. And from there, I went downtown and I worked for a record producer named Bill Laswell, who also had a very big influence on my life. He, an incredible producer. He wrote and produced Rocket by Herbie Hancock. He worked with Public Image Limited, Peter Gabriel, Yoko Ono, Laurie Anderson.
He was one of the cool producers.
So cool. And I got to go in there and really kind of work head on with him. And it was there that there was another gentleman named Tony Mylant who used to manage the Fine Young Cannibals, and Herbie, who introduced me. He's the one who hired me and introduced me to Bill, but he also introduced me to Mark Roswell. And I met Mark Roswell, and we were all invited to go to the Commitments premiere. And it was there that
Mark music supervised that film,
he
right?
did.
Right.
He music supervised that film, and he was a friend of Tony's. And we all went to the premiere, and I was like, this is incredible. Like, look at this job. This was like my aha moment. Like, you can take all this experience that I had of working in a studio, working at a record label, working for a record producer, and then you get to take that creative energy and all those business skills, and you get to work in film. And from there, I was like, that's what I want to do. And that's how it all started.
And did Mark hire you?
Mark, you know, he hired me. He's funny, I don't even know if he remembers this, but he hired me to organize his CDs in his house in LA.
It was a start. It was a start.
It was a start. Then I decided to, I lived in New York, as you know, and I picked up and moved to Los Angeles. And when I moved out here, I was pounding the pavement. I was an intern at Women in Film, which now I'm on the board, which I know we're going to talk about. And I also worked for Cheryl Churchill, was a music supervisor, as her assistant. And I went in, and that's when I sort of learned the ropes. And then at that time, I was, through friends, networking and trying to find a job as a music supervisor. And Ted Hope at Good Machine had his assistant Glenn Bausner call me. I'll never forget it. I was in LA, and he's like, "This is Glenn Bausner. Ted Hope would like to talk to you." You know, and I was like, "Fantastic." And I was going home for the holidays, and I went to meet my very first film called Love God. And I believe that Ted had a connection with the whole Bill Laswell group, so he knew Fred Marr and those people, so there was an instant connection, and he hired me.
So that was it.
And
you were in.
And I was in.
100 films later, here we are.
I know. I was like that movie. I say this all the time, like with Good Machine. I did about, I guess, around like about 25 or so movies with the Good Machine team. Ted
so
and Anthony.
were you in-house with them, or you were just independent?
So when I first started, I was sort of like that movie, What About Bob? I was like, they gave me a film, and then I didn't have anywhere to go, so like that I just stayed around and would do it whatever I could. And
they were rolling at that point. They had a
huge
New York Bay presence, and you became their go-to gal.
I like to think so. The other thing that was so nice about it is, you know, your first experiences, you know, to have mine be with the team at Good Machine, Ted Hope and James Seamus and Anthony Bregman and Mary Jane Skalski and Ross Katz and Glenn Bausner, everyone who's just doing so incredibly well now. But it was such a great spirit, and it was also the thing that they were writer-director driven, and really just being a part of that process. And you know, and at the time, you know, when you had to, I think my first movie, I had 55 songs and Love God and no money and had to figure it out, and I was happy to do it. And that's kind of how it all started.
So talk about the process. So this, primarily as an independent supervisor, your budgets are very limited. So you have to be really clever, and you know, obviously working at a record company helps, and knowing the A&R process of what artists are coming, because you can't necessarily afford the artist when they get to that certain level. So talk about how you use A&R in your world as far as seeing what bands are coming up and musicians are starting to happen, so that you can place them in a film, so by the time the movie comes out, they're much bigger. How much do you listen to music yourself and look for future-based stuff?
You know something? I listen to it all the time. You know, first of all, I think that one of the things that's really important to talk about music supervision, and my goal always is that it's a story-driven process. So having those initial conversations that turn around and talk to a director and say, especially with sometimes with lower budgets or, you know, more challenged budgets, what's the goal? What's the goal with music? How are we going to use music? And then what's your dream? What's your dream list? Because you have to dream, because that's why we're here. You do. And on the other hand, you have to be in reality, which is important. So we kind of like, I always like to put forward a plan of attack and then kind of figure out how I'm going to go from there. And I have done, you know, I've baked cookies, I've gone on letter writing campaigns, you know, for those dreams, those things that you need to happen, because it's so important. There's no better feeling than going back to a director to say, I got it. We got it. And we did it.
So tell us your favorite dream story that came true and what you did to help realize that dream.
What's a favorite dream story? I have a few. I would say.
Doesn't have to be favorite. It could be one of a favorite.
Yeah, one of my favorites.
Yes.
I think on Adventureland, you know, I loved that movie so much for many reasons. One, because Greg Mottola is awesome. Two, because it was a time that I loved, the 80s, and it took place in a carnival. And I was a carny, you know, in high school. So I
back that up. What do you mean? Give me that one. Where did you work?
I worked at the boardwalk in Seaside Heights, and I would
spin the
wheel and get people to cut. I did. Like, how about it? Don't walk by, give it a try. Break a buck, try your luck. You got to be in it to win it.
Wow.
And,
so you're perfect for this business.
Exactly. It was really funny, and it was kind of. In that script, so people were carnies. And I remember when I went in to meet Greg, I told him my carny story. I don't even know if he remembers it, but it was important to me. And also, I had a Plymouth Reliant K car, and that was the car in the movie.
Wow.
So
you were in.
Like,
you were locked in.
I'm like, this is my movie. And that Ted Hope was producing, and Ann Carey, and such a great Good Machine team. But there was that journey of, you know, in the story, there is a line where we use Lou Reed, and we use him as a storyline for Ryan Reynolds' character. And it was a big, you know, it was a labor of love to pull that in, because it was a low-budget movie. We had 4, but Satellite of Love was like the through line and was so great, and it was a really, really nice. And the second one in that movie, Lou Reed signing on to be that story arc, and the second one was Tops by the Rolling Stones. And
that's some big stuff.
A big, like really big. Rush and In Excess, and so much for really like people for the labor of love,
right.
which is a big part of the role of supervision. I'm getting there and being the salesperson for the film. But I remember that took me, I don't know, it took me like 7 months to clear that Rolling Stone song. And when you finally get it, and we had a line with the director where it was Tracy will walk on broken glass, and those were my my top my songs, and I had to go and get them. And the other ones like we love them, and then the other ones like we really love them, but we can replace them.
Right.
And
temp love's a dangerous thing.
And you know the Stones were, and you know it's so nice that years later, when Rolling Stone magazine picks like the top 25 rock and roll moments in film, you know, and they pick Tops by in Adventureland.
Yeah, and that's to
it's
me,
awesome.
that to me is why we do what we do. For that, you know, again, it's not about the accolades, but it's like when you, like you said, when you see that in print, and that's something that you know that you did, found, and went to the wall for, and got.
It's a good
that's
feeling,
a sense
isn't
of accomplishment.
it?
Absolutely, that's what it's all about.
And you know, it really, and it also worked for the story, and it was nice to watch some of like the undiscovered gems come about as well. It was really great. It was a good feeling, a great movie, and a lot of fun.
So Coffee and Cigarettes was another kind of cool movie that sticks in my head after all these years. Tell us about the music in that film.
You know something? I mean, Jim Jarmusch really, really pulled all that together. He is, you know, one of my favorite directors, and it was such an honor to work with him. And I love the fact that there were all these vignettes that had been filmed over a certain period of time.
It was a movie of vignettes, right?
And having to go out and make those deals, and that was a true labor of love, to pull, like, you know, the Iggy songs in, and just super cool. It was great.
And what about Victor Vargas? Tell us about that one. That was
I was brought on board Victor Vargas through my friend Scott McCauley, and who do you know?
Yeah,
Scott?
I know Scott.
Scott's awesome, a dear friend, and with Peter Sollett, and that was and Myron Kirsten, who was the editor, and all of us just part of that New York filmmaking community, and that was just a joy to work on. It was just joyful. Latin music, Lower East Side, hot summer days, pulling that soundtrack together. It was a lot of fun.
And what about another favorite of mine, The Messenger? Tell us about that, working with Owen.
Owen is so cool. I love that movie. We had a really good time, and what was particularly interesting about it is that we, you know, Woody and Ben's characters at one point in the movie sing Home on the Range, and they're in a car, and we had this idea of having it covered for the end titles, and we got Willie Nelson to sing it.
Wow, that's great.
And it was so great, and it's so authentic and in a style that only Willie can do. And certainly a testament to Woody Harrelson helping to broker that.
Did Willie Nelson get to see the film?
I believe he did.
Right, because those guys smoke a lot of weed together, as I remember.
I do not know that.
Yeah, I've seen that in the paper somewhere.
You've seen that in the papers.
Yeah.
But really, you know, and I love that. Who would have thought that, you know, a traditional song could be poignant and awesome and sum up a movie, and yet it did.
Right.
And it worked really well, and Oren loved it.
So you moving on through, you've worked on these indies, and then you get to some bigger films, and then all of a sudden you get an invitation or a job offer to come to work at a middle range studio at the time, which was Lionsgate Films. Talk about the process of going there and hanging up the independent supervision hat and going for something bigger, and what happened while you were there over those 5 years.
You know, it was an incredible experience. You know, I had. You know, there were a lot of, I'd been in New York for 15 years, went to college in New York, and all my jobs.
You grew up where, in Jersey?
Mm-hmm.
Where?
Paramus.
Paramus. Okay.
But I lived in the city for 17 years, went to college and started my career there. And you get to a point at your life in certain spots and you're like, I think it's time for a change. So I started to do this thing, which I know sounds crazy, but to be bi-coastal, where I was like starting to rent places in LA and kind of trying to figure out if it would be a good fit. And when I came out to LA, I was supervising some films out here so I could make the transition. And the truth is I was at the Nashville Film Festival and I was on a panel with Jay Farris, and that's where we met.
Jay was running the Lionsgate
Jay
music
was running
department at the
the Lionsgate Film Music Department, and he brought me in for an interview, saying he was looking to make some additions to the team, and it was a nice organic process moving into Lionsgate because I was brought on as a consultant first. I remember my first movie there was Punisher Warzone. And I'd never worked on a movie like that, so it was,
violent.
Not just violence, but just badass and cool. Like it was a lot of fun, and I consulted, and then I was brought in as a VP of film music, and then in 2008 I was the head of film music, and there is a big difference in changing. I think one of the bigger things is that, especially with independents, and many independents that I worked on, you're making a movie in order to get it picked up by a distributor. So with that comes, you're kind of scrappy sometimes, and you don't have a lot of means, and your budget is your budget, and there's this kind of united team spirit in a way. That you're all in it together, and you are trying to carry the baby to the finish line in order to get to a Lionsgate or to a Miramax or to a Paramount. And I love that process. And what was great to go into Lionsgate and just see the other side of the process, to see how, as a music supervisor, you're in your bubble, you're in your music bubble, your supervisor bubble a lot. When you go into a company, and especially an entrepreneurial company like Lionsgate, you see all sides of the filmmaking process, and to be exposed to that was, a gift. And that is watching how a slate develops, and watching how scripts are developed, and how working with directors and how those plans are going to unfold. And also all the cool things that come together, like marketing and international and distribution. And it's a fantastic experience. And it was great to watch the evolution. When I think when I started there, we were doing 5 to 10 movies a year, and leaving maybe in the 20s. But that also encompasses acquisitions and co-productions and Sundance pickups and all those things.
And talk about the madness that was Hunger Games. Talk about the process of working with filmmakers and their music supervisor to create the music, and as a person who's music supervised so many movies, how is it different to work with a music supervisor that's in the process already?
Right. Well, the interesting part on the first Hunger Games, look, in the body of the film, there are its score, and James Newton Howard was responsible for an incredible score and really bringing that musical vision to life, per Gary Ross. And my job really was to just help to make sure that the ship was running smoothly and everybody was happy, and we were meeting all the deadlines. And then obviously T-Bone Burnett was a big part of the Hunger Games. And from there, we also had a label partner in Republic Records, and started to create a companion album called, The Hunger Games.
Because there's not that much music in the film, right?
There is not. So, Arcade Fire came on board to write the Capitol Anthem, and they also worked on a song with T-Bone. And also we had Taylor Swift with the Civil Wars for our end title, which, how wonderful is that, with just how well received it was. And, the thing about working on the Hunger Games for me was that you're really just trying to be true to the fans. You're trying to be true to the book, and to the movie, and trying to create music that the fans will embrace. That's always the goal.
In a studio role, you have to deal with the studio, the filmmaker, the composer, in this case a big label partner that has their vested interest and they want their things on there as much as possible, and you also have to deal with the artist in the sense of, you know, and the supervisor. So you have all these different spokes out of the wheel, you're in the middle, and what are the biggest, I don't want to say conflicts, but, you know, how do you make everybody work together and be on the same page?
You know, I think that it all comes, I think people have a united goal. And the goal is to do your best work and to stay true to what it all comes down to. Filmmaking for me and is about the storytelling process. And we've all seen projects where things don't, sometimes they don't feel connected. And I think that the biggest goal for a studio is to make sure that you're connected. You're connected to the fan base, you're connected to the story, and then where does music come from within that process? And I think with, you know, for the Hunger Games, you know, the first album was really a love letter to District 12 from the books, and I think it was executed beautifully, and that's like that's a proud moment. It's a proud moment. And how do you keep everyone happy? You do your best.
That's all you could do.
You do your
So a couple
best,
of things, interesting, you know, sidelights, things you do every year at Sundance. You work with Peter Golub, who works with the Sundance Composers Lab and create a great event. And last year, I didn't make this year's, but last year the 20 women from 20 Feet from Stardom just was amazing. Talk about how you got involved with that and why you love doing that.
Well, first of all, how lucky am I to be involved with Sundance Institute, which I have been for the past 15 years. And that festival means so much to me. I feel like it's where I massively fell in love with what I do. My first Sundance in 1997, a few decades ago.
A couple years ago.
My first Sundance, I had 5 films that I music supervised there, and when you're working on them in New York, and you're scraping your nickels
come
together,
to fruition, right.
And you have no idea, you know,
right.
And it's that, you know, when you, it's like getting your SAT scores or whatever, you know, like around Thanksgiving, everybody gets their note that they're getting in or not,
and everybody got
in, and it was pretty incredible. And that festival, you know, I made some really good friends, and I then started to like connect with, you know, Doreen Ringer Ross, who I sat next to at one of my films, Mary Jane's Not a Virgin Anymore. And we had a nice, like, it was just a nice moment. I remember that moment very clearly. I knew we were going to be friends. And Doreen introduced me to Peter Golub. And I was an advisor for the lab. And I've been doing that for a long time, which I love. And Peter had asked me to come on to help curate this night. And the night is called A Celebration of Music and Film. And it's hosted by the Institute. And I love the fact that we get to put our stamp on it and curate a night that really focuses on music in films, music from a storytelling perspective, music that brings magic and soul to a feature film. And that's what the festival is about. And so over the years, we've had, you know, just incredible from...
Name some of the names that you've had over the years.
Ricky Lee Jones, Patti Smith, Lou Reed, the women from 20 Feet. We had one year, we had Mos Def singing Fats Waller songs with Michel Gondry on drums. It was with Jean-Michel Bernard on piano. Just like, we every year, it's awesome, and the room holds 300 people.
It's a beautiful
and
room, yeah.
It's so beautiful, and we always try to create a Sundance moment, a magic moment. That's always our goal.
It's great.
Anyway. And you know, this year we had the music of Joe Albany, which is a jazz musician, a film called Lowdown, and we had Flea, and Ohad, Flea from the Chili Peppers, and Ohad, who was the composer, and playing this beautiful jazz music. And we had Glenn Close reading excerpts from the book, and it was incredible.
Sorry, I missed it. So closing, you had mentioned at the beginning of the interview that you were an intern for Women in Film. How does it feel to go all these years later and be a board member in such a cool organization that celebrates both, women in film?
You know something? It's really an honor. I get to go to a meeting and sit with these incredibly smart, talented women who are advancing and championing the work of other women. And I couldn't be more proud. I really could not. It's when I was an intern, I was an angel at the Crystal Awards. I was Paul Michael Glazer's angel. I don't know if you'll remember his name.
Starsky and Hutch?
But I remember him. He was so lovely, and I thought, wow, how cool is this? And now, to see that organization grow and blossom is fantastic, and I'm so happy to be a part of it.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on, and welcome back to the Independent Film Music Ranks.
It's good to be back.
Look for her film, Ivan Reitman film coming up, and her Shakespeare adaptation, and we'll be hearing plenty from Tracy McKnight. So thank you again.
Thank you.
See you guys next time on Q Score. For more Q Score, please check us out at emPOWERme.tv to find out what goes on behind the curtain and how the film and TV music gets made. It happens right here. Tune in.